Hey guys, Hakua here. So today I want to talk more about the White Force Azamina Fiendsmith pile, and I want to start by making a correction to one of my mistakes from the last video. I said that you couldn't tribute the uh, Nibiru token for Deception. It was incorrect. You can actually tribute the token. I was under the impression that Deception needed to tribute to the graveyard. It doesn't. It just needs to tribute any monster. So sorry about that. That was just a mistake on my part. So hopefully that um, maybe changes your assessment. Of course, I talked a lot about trying to play around Nibiru early on. I still stand by that. I think it's still way better to play into your Omni Negate as early as possible so you can play around the most hand traps as possible. So I still stand by my combo lines and thinking that some combos are a little less than optimal that people are doing, but it was incorrect for me to say that this was wrong for you to play into Nib if you want to get extra value off of some of your cards. And if they don't have Nib, maybe you can end on extra interaction or two. But even if they do Nib you, you still have this line to go into your Fiendsmith and Azamina stuff. So like it's completely fine. I was wrong about that, but we learned things, and now I'm gonna be able to use this knowledge in my future games as well. Um, so that's the first thing I want to talk about. The second thing I want to talk about is want to revisit like the ratio conversation. I talked a lot about playing 3 Diabellstar 3 Wanted with the quote unquote bad card Magistus Chorizo, and it is a 4 card combo, quote unquote, to go into that line. So it's like super risky into hand traps. And I talked about how like, you just gotta play the odds. Like some with the statistics, you're gonna end up with that kind of hand, and you have to just pray your opponent has no hand traps. And while that much is still true, we can do safer things. And I've looked at a lot of stuff. I've like studied some stuff, and I found like a better route we could be taking. So let's talk about it. So we're gonna start with Diabellstar and um, a bunch of non-engine, because this is the scenario we were talking about last time. So something like this, right? We only have Diabellstar and a bunch of non-engine, right? So for this combo to work, we still need a monster in our hand, unfortunately, um, because we need something to tribute off of the Deception. So we're going to start by discarding a blank card in our hand. We do play more monsters than spell trap cards, so hopefully it's fine. And we're going to get the Deception, of course, and we're going to set to our field. We're going to activate the Deception, and from here, you want to tribute the monster in our hand. The reason why you don't want to tribute the Diabellstar on the field is if we get ashed here, we have no further play. We just have the hand traps, which maybe that's the way you want to play. However, I think it's a little bit nicer to keep the Diabellstar on the field if you can, because if you do get ashed from this point, right, then this is now a body blocker that can summon itself from the graveyard if it's sent to the graveyard on your opponent's turn. You can just send the Deception on the field, which has now been sent while it's face up, so it'll also return back to the field. And now you can get Deception plus one to, get a draw, stuff like that. So I think it's nicer to do that if you have a monster in your hand, if possible. If you don't have a monster in your hand, then you will be forced to tribute this to go into your Azamina stuff, and we can talk about what to do in those scenarios. So let's say we do have a monster, we tribute our monster in hand, we're going to get the Hollowed Azamina. We're going to activate it to summon out the Mu Arceolago. And here the Mu Arceolago is going to search a new card that I'm playing that I didn't talk about before, which is Sinful Spoils of Slumber Morrian. In case you guys don't know what this card does, it is just a Book of Moon for special summon monsters. A special summon monster. It doesn't require anything on your field. Like you don't have to control a spellcaster or illusion. It's just a straight up Book of Moon. The reason why this is nice is because it's still a Sinful Spoils card. So from here, after you've added this to your hand, you can, link these two off into your Moon of the Closed Heaven. And then you can activate the Hollowed Azamina in your graveyard to get Mu Arceolago back to the extra deck and add this back to your hand. And then you can activate Hollowed, sending the Morrian, which is a Sinful Spoils spell trap, to the graveyard in order to summon Ilia Sylvia. And this, of course, is still summon number 4, so you're still playing under Nib. And then the secondary effect, which is the reason why it's in the Sinful Spoils archetype, is if you control a level 5 or higher illusion monster, which Ilia Sylvia is, you can set this card back to the field. And in the event that your opponent does Nibiru you or anything, this is a trap card, so you can just quick effect set it to the field. And then it leaves the field when it gets banished when it leaves the field if it's set this way, but that's fine. That's completely irrelevant. Even if it is banished, it's still Sinful Spoils cards, so you can still recycle it with Wanted. So from here, you're going to send this off to make Requiem, and then Requiem effect to get Lacrima, and then Lacrima will get Engraver to our graveyard. And then from here, we're going to summon back the Engraver by shuffling back the Moon. And these two cards will simply go into IP Masquerena. So these are sort of the new cards I'm playing. And then, of course, don't forget to reset your Morrian from the graveyard. So this is the end board now of the just Diabellstar. And it still ends on a decent amount of interruptions, right? Because you have the Omnigate and the Book of Moon, so this is 2 interruptions. Then you have, of course, the Lacrima bring back Requiem, and then Requiem bring out Lacrima on your opponent's turn. And then this card will send, oops, if I can find it. Sorry, I'm a little bit less prepared than I am last time. I'll send the Fiendsmith in Paradise to your graveyard. And then the Fiendsmith in Paradise, when your opponent summons a special summons monster. Or actually, I think it's just summons. If your opponent special summons monster, I don't know, it is a special summon, yeah. Special summons a monster, you can send the Desiree by banishing the Paradise. And the Fiendsmith Desiree will shuffle back a card to send a card from field to the graveyard, which can be nice. So that's interruption number 3. And then, of course, you have IP Masquerena. Now you have a Lacrima on the field, so you have that extra body, which is super nice. And that will go into your SP Little Knight. SP Little Knight effects. So this will be number 4. And then you can go for SP Little Knight banish itself and something else, which is interaction number 5. And then you still have these 2 cards in your hands, which could be interruptions 6 and 7. So it's still a decent amount of interruption with just the Diabellstar. And beyond that, I forgot, Deception is supposed to set itself back to the field. Don't forget that. It's follow-up. I probably should have remembered that, but I'm dumb. And then, of course, you have Engraver, of course, which can also be follow-up. So those are what you do with the Diabellstar line without Magistus Chorizo, because, of course, Magistus Chorizo is super risky. And I was thinking a lot about what the end goal of an end board should be. And it shouldn't be to really necessarily need to go into your White Forest combo line if you can still get like 5 to 7 interruptions with just being a little bit less risky, right? Especially since Blue Eyes is in the meta right now, and they're also on a lot of hand traps. And, you know, that deck is a little bit more low to the ground. So if you also play a bit more low to the ground, like, you'll be okay. Especially since you have cards like, you know, Engraver, which is insane for the grind game. This card, sorry, I have to say this to people who aren't able to afford the Fiendsmith stuff, but it truly is out of this world how good these cards are, especially for this deck. And then let's talk a little bit about the extra deck, because people really wanted to see what I was running in my extra deck. And obviously, I'm no longer running Magistus Chorizo, because I've replaced it with this IP Masquerena. And beyond that, because I'm also playing this line, as you can see, I'm setting this trap card, Sinful Spoils Morrian, instead. So the alternative card I was running before was Sinful Spoils with the White Forest, which is also an interruption to summon Guardian Chimera. However, the problem with that card is in the scenario I just showed you, where we're ending on IP plus Ilia Sylvia, like this board right here. If this card, first of all, if this card is sent to the graveyard, if Sinful Spoils of the White Forest is sent to the graveyard by Hollowed Azamina, it is not by a monster effect, so it does not set itself back to the field. So already it's -1 in terms of interruption compared to this card, with this board specifically. And then number two, if you do end up on this board, after you use this Omni Negate, you have just SP Little Knight on the field, right? Because if you use all your interruptions, right, you just have SP Little Knight on your field. It's the only card in your field. You can't make anything with this. You can't make Guardian Chimera with just this card, right? You have two other cards in your hand, but those two cards have to be monsters, and that's very unlikely. And even if you did, that's assuming you didn't use the other effect of SP Little Knight to banish itself. You'll be left with no cards. No cards at all, right? And if you, have the fusion spell set somehow, and you've used up all your actions, now it's super dead. And if you had a Fool Loss in your hand from turn 1, if you use this trap card instead, you can use it, and now your board will be completely empty, and it actually gives you a way to Fool Loss after 5 interruptions, which is an insane thing to think about, but it can happen. Unlikely, I would say, because in the event that you're doing this combo line, you're probably tributing the Foolos from your hand. But if you had 2 Fooloses or something like that, then that is an option. In terms of like main deck, I'm still really testing, so I haven't really gotten to do a lot of changes. I will say, there's stuff to talk about with these cards, like how much you can run. If you're more of a budget player and you don't think you can afford the Fiendsmith, I think you can just play 1 and 1, like just one of each of these. I think that's a lot more affordable, obviously. I think Requiem Engraver is really the only expensive card. Like the rest of them are relatively affordable. Like even the extra deck, like all these cards are relatively affordable. So I think if you can afford the 1 Engraver, I say you play the 1 Engraver and just don't have to worry about anything else. Obviously, you could also play the 1 Trap, so you can just play these 3 cards for literally the interaction I just showed you with the IP Masquerena. But if you do have more cards you can play, I'm playing not the full package. I'm actually playing a bit of an odd ratio to consider, but I'm playing the 7 cards, so just the 7. I'm not playing the full engravers because I just don't have room, and I think it's not as necessary to have all of the full package. Like this is still fine. It's not super bricky because realistically these cards are the worst ones to have in your hands. Like these ones are okay. So having the 3rd engraver is also fine in your hand. But you're going 3 good cards, 3 bad cards. And if you go 4 good cards, 3 bad cards, the math is still about the same. Unless you particularly really want to open engraver in your hand, then you can bump it up to 3 because it'll increase your odds pretty drastically. But a lot of the times we're getting into our Fiendsmith combo through Moon, so I don't think you need the full package. I think this is the minimum package you can run, just like these 3. But I just didn't want hands where it was awkward without the tract, right? So like if you have like both of these cards in your hand, you can discard the engraver to search the paradise, but then it's a little awkward because you still have this Lacrima in your hand. Whereas if you had both these cards, you could get tracked, and then you could tract, and you could discard the Lacrima if you needed to, but you could get into the Lurry, and then Lurry could combo on the field and summon the Lacrima from your hand. It's just like a little bit better than just discard engraver, because this will force you to normal summon the Lacrima. I'm like rambling on about Fiendsmith stuff. Like if you've played the Fiendsmith cards, you probably know what I'm talking about. So I think this is the quote-unquote minimum you can play if you want to play more targets for Fiendsmith engraver in your hand, because I just don't want this card to be super dead in my hand. And getting these spell and trap cards in your hand are okay because you can always discard them. Like Fiendsmith in Paradise is always okay in the hand because it always can just be discard fodder. And Tract is completely fine. You can just use Tract to get into your Fiendsmith combo, and then you also get the equip. So that's why like these 3 cards are like particularly bad, because you don't really want to normal summon these cards in your deck if you can help it. Obviously, like if you don't have any normal summons, then these are completely fine, but really you don't want to if you don't have to. But so that's the Fiendsmith package I'm running. I'm planning to run currently. In terms of like the White Forest stuff, let's talk about like the other cards. I mean, from the previous video, you probably already saw my ratios of like the wanted and the main deck monsters. I'm still currently testing. This is currently like a board breaking version. I don't really like it. I'm gonna probably go back to the hand trap approach, but it's just something I'm testing because I want to make sure I like try all the stuff. So, so here's what I think, right, in terms of deck building after coming to terms with a lot of stuff. Is obviously we are always playing this ratio of cards. I think this is just like probably the correct ratio, both in terms of math and what's just best in terms of grind game. Um, 3 of the best ones, and then 1 of each of the little ones. A Stellar, of course, is a starter, but also more than that, she's like follow up more so because she can come back from the grave every turn. I don't think you need more than 1 for that same reason because she can just keep recurring herself from the graveyard. So it's like becomes much less good like if you have another one of these in rotation. So that's pretty standard. The only major change I'm making too is, of course, well, Wanteds are always staying at 3. This is just like the best card in terms of the Wanted package, the Diabellstar package. And then because we're not playing the Magistus Chorizo line, I actually think it's correct to actually cut down on the Black Witches. So we're gonna go down to 2. So that way we can still have our 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Or wait, did I get that right? 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Oh, wait, no. These are not all starters, right? 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So we still have 12 starters, which is like the key sort of number I was trying to aim for. And then we have the deception. I actually think it might be correct. I haven't really changed the ratios yet, but maybe it's probably better to do this ratio. 2 Diabellstar, 2 wanted, 2 deception. And the reason being is if you have deception, it's actually quite nice to start with this card and see if it gets ashed. Because if you have this combination in your hand, you want to use deception. A lot of the times they will ash this card if they have ash because it will stop the Omni Negate, which is a lot harder to deal with. And if they don't ash this, then now you're probably going to have access to your Omni Negate, which is super nice because then you can resolve this card from your hand and be protected. But if they do ash this card and you have this card in your hand, now this deception is a free send for this LZ and they can't ash it. So now you're guaranteed combo, which is super nice. So I do think it's probably worth it to play a second deception. And in those like grindy games, having a second one in rotation can be nice sometimes, even in time and stuff like that. But it can search other cards. It can search any Azamina cards. So that means you can also search LZ when you need to. You can search Azamina Aphis as well, which is the other trap card. And so I'm probably going to go with that ratio. So like this is probably the ratio of like the main monsters, of course, that I'm playing. Oh, of course. Playing, let's talk about the trap cards we're playing and the spell and trap cards we're playing. So probably all of these. Yep. Yes. Okay. So obviously the hollow to go with the deception, the tails, the aphis, and the slumber. This is now the replacement for the sinful spoils of the White Forest. No longer playing Guardian Chimera. I actually do want to play Woes as well. I completely forgot to include that in this video. I'm super underprepared compared to last time, but these are the main ratios of cards I'm running. So that's like what? 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. 26. So that's 26 cards, including the woes, which I don't have included here. So that's 26 cards. So that leaves you room for, what is that, 14 non-engine? Oh, wait. This card should be here too. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27. So that's 27 cards. So that leaves you room for 13 non-engine. If you want to play a 40 card deck, I think you actually should go above 40 in this deck, just because you are playing like pseudo bricks that you don't really want to see. So I think 42 is probably a fine amount of cards you want to run. So that leaves you room for 15 non-engine. So obviously you're gonna play Ash and Imperm. Yeah, well, Ash for sure you're gonna play. Imperm we can make an argument for. I still think it's really good, so I'm gonna play it. And then this deck that I was playing a board breaker approach, so it's a little bit less focused. I don't have Fualoses. Obviously, I would play Fualoses if I had them, but you know I don't. One of these is a troll, probably. Yeah. And then, so I said 15, right? So probably, and then you play 3 more non-engine. So probably something like this, if you wanted to go this approach. I was trying Black Goat Laughs. I actually don't really like it that much, so I think I'm gonna cut it. Your mileage may vary with this card. I just think this card is too hard to play efficiently, because you really have to be really well versed in your opponent's deck or in very specific scenarios to call the right card. Obviously, against Ryzel, it's very obvious to call Detonator, but it's not that obvious against every other deck in the format. And this card is a card where if you call it wrong, it does nothing. And so you're severely punished for that. And this is just from a personal perspective. You have to know where your weaknesses are. I'm not a pro player. I don't have the capacity to really know where the best cards to call are for this card. I think this card is really strong if you really know your matchups. I'm just not that strong of a player, so I think playing this card is actually really weak for me, and I'd rather play something else. So that's why I've decided to cut this card. So from here, like the thing to really consider is this Metaltronus becomes really interesting in this format because Blue Eyes is now in the format, and what kind of cards do Blue Eyes cards have? They have light spellcasters. Holy crap, your whole deck is light spellcasters. So this card becomes really interesting in being able to bring out a free body. Obviously, like the card you bring out is going to be negated, but now you'll have it in rotation. An extra body can be really good, especially if you get a tuner or a non-tuner, or something like LZ, where if she's synchroed off, she'll still get her effect in the graveyard. These other cards, of course, like if you bring out a Stellar and you send her away to the graveyard, she can maybe come back out on a later turn. So that's why these cards are super strong. I think this is probably the amount of non-engine I want to play. I don't have Fualos, which is why I'm playing Droll. If I had Fualos, then maybe I would probably replace Droll and put Droll in my side deck. I do still think Droll is really nice in the format to have, just because it's pretty decent against pure Ryzel, depending on what they start with. And of course, it's pretty decent against Blue Eyes as well if they have to start off with any of their searches. So it's a decent card. And of course, it is a spellcaster, so you can normal summon it to get Tails effect. If it comes up, it probably doesn't come up that much, but that's where I'm at right now. The other interesting card to consider instead of Metaltronus is main decking the Ultimate Slayers, which you probably saw a preview of. I wouldn't probably play both of these cards, like Metaltronus and Ultimate Slayer. I would probably pick between the two. And I think Ultimate Slayer is actually a really interesting card in this deck to main deck, because you actually already run like pretty much every type of monster in your extra deck. So you can still get the value regardless of your matchup. And against Blue Eyes, I know that if you try to Ultimate Slayer I forget the name of the Blue Eyes monster, the Blue Eyes Synchro, they can chain one of their trap cards and then tag out the Blue Eyes to get the Omni Negate, or it's not an Omni Negate, but a face-up card negate. I think it is a card on the field, a card on the field negate effect. But that's where things get interesting because the card that they tag out from has a effect that negates a card in the graveyard, right? And that card is actually a real interruption versus White Forest because White Forest activates a ton of cards in the graveyard. And them being able to negate one of your graveyard effects is actually super detrimental. So even though Ultimate Slayer doesn't necessarily deal with the Omni Negate because you're getting rid of another card, it does mean you force them to either activate True Light or another spell or trap card that they have face down already in order to then get rid of their graveyard negate. So you do technically get rid of 2 interruptions with this one card. And then the card you send, you could play a synchro target for it, but you can actually just send Diabellstar Queen because if you're going second, it's really hard to summon Queen, so it's just pretty safe to send. And then later on in the turn, if you have your Sylvies or Rusia in the graveyard, now you have an additional extender because you have an additional synchro monster to bounce. So all that stuff does come up. And I think for that reason, Ultimate Slayer is looking to be a pretty cool card to play. And yeah, of course, you play Aggregator. Obviously, in your extra deck, originally I was playing a Detonator for the Metaltronus target, but now you can actually just switch that to Aggregator instead. And Malice, of course, if we're talking about Malice, it's a super hard deck to deal with. Neither of these cards are super crazy against Malice anyway. I mean, you just gotta decide like what you're losing to, and it's for me, it's Malice. If I get paired up against Malice, I'm just gonna take the L in game 1 and then try to kill them in the side deck games 2 and 3 with you run the 3 Lancias and the 3 Chaos Angel Chaos Hunters. So yeah, that's my deck so far. I'm currently testing with. If we want to talk about the extra deck, I think it's like super straightforward. But for those who are also curious about my deck list, you're playing one of. Sorry, this is like a complete mess. Let me clean up a little bit so you don't have to witness this madness on the field right now. Boop, boop, boop. That's 42 cards I think in the main deck. Oh, the other thing too is I'm playing 2 talents, but you could also play 1 talents, 1 thrust. The thrust is actually pretty decent in White Forest because any trap card you set going first is a pretty strong trap card, but also you can send it to the graveyard for a White Forest effect. So it becomes an additional resource as well. So it's not bad. I might do 1 talents, 1 thrust instead of 2 talents. You can decide what you want to do with that. But that's my deck for those curious. So obviously I'm playing one of each of these synchros, one of each of the White Forest synchros, and then the Chaos Angel. Chaos Angel, super strong, very good into a lot of matchups, very hard for a lot of decks to out. You can start with Chaos Angel a lot of times, and then if you later go into another synchro like Silvera, now this Silvera is also protected from monster effects, especially in the Blue Eyes matchup where there's a lot of effect veilers because they're searching a lot of effect veilers. Like that is one way to play around the effect veilers. And then we're playing all the Fiendsmith stuff, of course. One of each of the Fiendsmith links, as well as Moon, who's the honorary Fiendsmith card, and then just the Desiree. I forgot to mention this earlier when I was talking about the IP, but the reason why I'm not playing Necrocrypt Princess plus Caesar is because it's 2 cards in the extra deck, which is more than just IP Masquerena, which is 1 card in the extra deck. And also, a lot of the times, if you're equipping Requiem to Lacrima, which is how you would make Necrocrypt Princess, you would usually want to use that Requiem as a spell and trap card for your White Forest cards. So when you equip Requiem, it's either going to be used for Engraver's effect to send another monster, or you're going to send it as a spell and trap card. So just most of the time, like you just don't have that. You don't have a way to really get into Caesar as effectively course, the SP Little Knight, the 2 Azamina cards. I think the other ones are not necessary. These are the ones you want to summon 90% of the time anyway. I'm not playing Aphez, or I am playing Aphez. I'm not playing the quick play Azamina card that Fusion summons, so the other ones don't really come up. The Moa Regina is an interesting one that comes up sometimes, but I feel like usually that comes up in more like risky game states. So I'm not sure I would agree with necessarily needing that combo line compared to like if you were playing a Chimera deck. Abyss Dweller, because of course this card is insane. It's good against a lot of matchups. It's good against the mirror match. You can churn out rank 4s in this deck. So obviously not as much as Ryzil, but when you do make rank 4s, this is obviously the best one. Hopefully it gets banned on the next ban list, because if you get Dwellered, you also lose. Also, the interesting thing about this Dweller is if you're playing Metaltronus in your deck, this can be a way to get rid of the opponent's Abyss Dweller. Obviously, if they have Detonator, they can just Detonator and then chain Abyss Dweller. But if for some reason like they don't do that, or for some reason like you're playing against a different deck that is not Detonator and they make Abyss Dweller, or you've hand trapped your opponents enough times and they know you're on White Force, so they're gonna, like, if you Fool Lost them, right, and they don't want you to draw a bunch of cards, they just make Dweller and pass because Dweller is way stronger than Detonator, then it's a way for Metaltronus to be live. It maybe will come up, maybe probably not, but yeah, it's really easy to summon this card in this deck, and you can end on this card. Anytime you can make Diabell Queen of the White Forest, you can pretty much make Abyss Dweller instead. So it comes up a decent amount. Well, not every time, but like a lot of times if you're making her with like Lacrima and stuff like that. And then my last card was the Detonator for the Metaltronus, but obviously I was just talking about maybe swapping this for Aggregator for the Ultimate Slayer, because I do think Ultimate Slayer is a little bit better than Metaltronus for the Ryzil matchup. And if they Dweller you, they Dweller you, so you just gotta pray they don't do that. And yeah, that's my deck. Obviously, there's not a lot of Malice Hate in my main deck or extra deck, so that's where the side deck is. I'm just playing 3 Lancia, 3 Lancia, 3 whatchamacallit, Chaos Hunters, and then I'm playing like, I don't know, some stuff. Oh yeah, XYZ Encore is an interesting side deck card because this card is a way to deal with Abyss Dweller, and there's no way, you cannot chain to this card at all, so it is technically an instant out to Dweller, but it's hard to say what's the best line of action. And then I was playing like Strikes for going first, which I think is still really strong in this deck going first. But yeah, that's my deck list. And of course, once again, I'm sorry about the previous video where I incorrectly stated that you cannot tribute a Nibiru token, but you can. Long video again, lots to ramble about, but yeah, thanks for watching, and see you in the next one. Hopefully I'll have a more comprehensive video with some combos and stuff. Peace out.